What if I told you the most terrifying killer of the 20th century wasn't a drifter, a shadowy figure lurking in dark alleys, or a face on the FBI's most wanted list? He was a man who lived next door, a church leader, a husband, a father, and a monster who called himself BTK. Bind, torture, kill. This is the story of Dennis Rader, the polite neighbor who smiled at you in the grocery store while secretly fantasizing about watching you take your last breath. But this story doesn't end where you think, because the secret he hid for decades is even darker than anyone imagined. It began on a cold January morning in 1974 in Wichita, Kansas. Charlie Otero, a teenage boy, walked home from school expecting to find his parents waiting with lunch. Instead, he opened the front door to a silence so heavy it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. As he stepped inside, his worst nightmare unfolded. His parents, Joseph and Julie, lay dead on the floor. His younger brother and sister, Joey and Josephine, were gone too-bound, strangled, lifeless. There were no signs of forced entry. No valuables were stolen. Whoever had done this hadn't come for money. They'd come for something much darker. The Otero murder sent shockwaves through Wichita. The brutality of the crime suggested something personal, but there was no connection to be found. Detectives were desperate for answers, but they were up against someone who wasn't just clever, he was patient, calculating, and invisible. While the city mourned, Dennis Rader was watching the news from his own living room. To the world, he was just another concerned citizen. To himself, he was admiring his work. He had just unleashed a monster inside him, and he wasn't done. Months later, in April 1974, another young woman, Catherine Bright, became his next target. Catherine was vibrant and full of life, but Rader saw her as his next project. He stalked her quietly, blending into her routine like a ghost. When the attack came, it was sudden, violent, and merciless. Catherine fought with a strength that surprised even him, but in the end, he was too prepared, too determined. She never stood a chance. When detectives looked at the Bright crime scene, they saw a disturbing pattern. Knots, bindings, careful planning. They were dealing with a sadist who wasn't killing for rage or revenge. He was killing because he wanted to. Then came the letter. It landed at a local newspaper in October that same year. Written in cold, precise language, the author confessed to the Otero murders, describing every detail that only the killer would know. He introduced himself with a name that would forever be burned into Wichita's nightmares. BTK. Bind. Torture. Kill. This wasn't just a confession. It was a game. A challenge to the police. A message to the entire city. You can't stop me. You'll never catch me. And he was right. For years, BTK stalked the shadows of Wichita like a phantom. The most chilling part? While the city feared him, Rader was living a picture-perfect life. He married. He had children. He worked at ADT Security, installing alarm systems for families terrified of BTK, never realizing the killer himself was standing in their living rooms, taking mental notes of their homes. He even became president of his church council and volunteered as a scout leader. By day, he was normal. By night, he wrote out detailed fantasies of what he called his project's plans for his next victims, drawings of women bound and gagged, sometimes wearing the very clothes he would later steal from them. Then, suddenly, the killing stopped, or so it seemed. The 1980s came and went with no new murders and no letters. Wichita began to relax. People thought BTK had either died or moved on. But Dennis Rader hadn't gone anywhere. He was raising his kids, going to church every Sunday, and feeding his dark hunger in secret. He just didn't strike. Not yet, but all monsters eventually come out of hiding. In 2004, 30 years after the Otero murders, a local news station aired a segment calling BTK one of the city's greatest unsolved mysteries. And that was his trigger. He couldn't stand being forgotten. He sent a package to the media, filled with disturbing photographs and personal items stolen from his victims. Wichita's nightmare had just returned. The city was terrified, but what BTK didn't realize was that the world had changed. Forensic technology was now light years ahead of what it had been in the 70s. Every letter he sent Every package he mailed was a breadcrumb leading straight to him. But here's the most chilling twist of all. Rader didn't stop because of fear or guilt. He stopped because he believed he'd outsmarted everyone. He thought he was untouchable. And that arrogance would lead to one single mistake that would bring down everything he had built, every lie he had told, and reveal one of the darkest secrets any neighbor could ever hide. For over 3 decades, Dennis Rader outsmarted investigators. He knew how to erase evidence, how to avoid leaving fingerprints, how to disappear into the crowd. Police had thousands of leads, hundreds of suspects, but no one ever thought to look at the man who sat at church meetings or volunteered with the Scouts. Rader blended into the fabric of Wichita like a shadow you never notice until it's too late. But what brought him down wasn't detective work, DNA, or even witness accounts. It was something far simpler: his own arrogance. In early 2005, BTK began sending taunting messages to local news outlets again. He craved attention. He wanted to remind everyone that he was still out there, smarter than the police, untouchable. Among his communications, he mailed a curious question to investigators. Can a floppy disk be traced back to me? The police played along. They sent a message through the media. No, the disk will be safe. It was a lie, and Rader took the bait. When the floppy disk arrived, forensic experts at the Kansas Bureau of Investigation immediately went to work. They dug deep into the disk's metadata, and there it was, a digital fingerprint. A file had been last modified by a user named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. Within hours, police knew they had their man, Dennis Rader. On February 25, 2005, after 31 years of hunting a ghost, Wichita police made their move. Rader was pulled over while driving home. The officers knew exactly who he was, but the man they arrested looked nothing like the serial killer they imagined. He was calm, dressed neatly, wearing glasses. He looked ordinary. At the police station, detectives asked a question everyone had been waiting to ask. "Do you know why you're here, Dennis?" He stared at them, paused for a moment, and simply said, "Oh, I have a pretty good idea." What followed was one of the most chilling interrogations in history. Rader confessed to all 10 murders, detailing each one with shocking precision, not in anger, not with remorse, but with the tone of someone describing a hobby. He told police how he stalked his victims, how he broke into their homes, how he tied them up and watched the fear in their eyes before killing them. When investigators asked why he stopped killing for years, Rader explained that he didn't stop, he just got better at controlling his urges. He compared his killings to projects, saying he would plan them like someone planning a vacation. The lack of emotion in his voice sent chills down the spine of everyone in the room. At his sentencing, Rader spoke in court for over 30 minutes, describing each murder as though he were reading from a journal. The families of the victims listened in shock and horror. Some wept, some stared at him with hatred. How could a man talk about strangling a child or tying up a mother like it was just another day at the office? He never apologized. He never begged for forgiveness. He saw himself as 2 people: Dennis, the family man, and BTK, the killer. And in his twisted mind, those 2 identities coexisted without conflict. Dennis Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, 1 for each of his victims. He will never see freedom again. But even behind bars, he remains a symbol of the most unsettling truth about evil that it can wear the face of someone ordinary. Someone who shakes your hand at the store. Someone who smiles while mowing their lawn. The people of Wichita struggled to come to terms with it. For years, they had lived next door to a monster, and no one saw it coming. His wife had no idea. His children never suspected. His church leaders were stunned. He had fooled them all. But here's the dark twist. Even now, Dennis Rader still craves attention. In interviews from prison, he sometimes talks about his crimes as if they are trophies. He even refers to his killings with a sense of pride, claiming he outsmarted law enforcement for decades. It's a chilling reminder that some monsters don't die, they just sit in a cell, reliving their darkness over and over again. The story of BTK isn't just about one man. It's about the terrifying reality that evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes, it looks like the neighbor who helps you carry your groceries. But let me leave you with this thought: if Dennis Rader could hide behind the mask of a family man for 30 years, how many other monsters might be out there right now? Hiding in plain sight?